episode of the Crossfade podcast. I'm Alex Gedrose, executive producer, sometimes host, hopefully fun. Sitting here with a good friend, Nick Arneson, who not only helps us produce the podcast, but is a former boss of mine, a current musician, a current creative director, and a former pizza delivery driver. And I'm really excited to sit down and talk to you, Nick, about the creative process behind all these collisions of our worlds together, right? We'll talk about brand marketing. I'm excited to hear about your creative process behind your music and as an artist. And then as someone who's spent time on the brand side, who has now launched their own production agency and doing your own thing, what you've taken with you from all of your worlds and how that makes sense as a creative.
First off, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. A little backstory about today, if that's cool.
Yeah.
We just finished recording episode 2 and 3, I think,
Yes.
of the Marks podcast. And then the idea was presented to, let's do a podcast together, which immediately was like, hell yeah, we should. Because Alex and I have known each other for probably 7, 8 years at this point. I hired you at Adidas, and we were on the original digital content team, and where we used to make a ton of awesome content that would go on the internet. And, you know, whether it was taking pictures of shoes, models, video shoots, photo shoots, whatever, that was one of the things we did. And then when I parted ways and started my own agency, you were one of the first folks to come out at your new role and be like, dude, I'll hire you. So I'm thrilled to be here with a close friend. This is great.
Yeah, we didn't want to stop working together. It's just in a, I think, much more fun way now. We both have a little bit more control over what happens. Some of those things we did maybe still are on the internet. We should look. I'm wearing Superstars.
I'm wearing Nikes there.
That's okay. We're allowed to now. So I'm really excited to have you on, Nick. And again, I put Nick on the spot because they were here and we're all set up and we said, hey, should we just record another episode? So here we are. But there's going to be some good stuff here. So I'm really excited to talk first about how the creative process, from your experience, translates between commercial work and personal art and whether they actually influence each other or compete. So let's go back to the brand marketing content land. Talk to me a little bit about maybe some of the tension points when we're at the precipice of an idea that we're excited about or you're excited about, and you also as a personal artist at the same time know there's more boundaries and guidelines and things that have to fall in line in order for this thing to get seen through from start to finish. Whereas when you're doing your own thing, the world's your oyster, right?
I will say that one of the main reasons I really got into putting out my own music, and, you know, I started making music videos on my own, was because I was doing creative work for brands, other people, and it felt so suffocating is not the right word because I still love the work, but it feels really restrictive because there's so many people, so many opinions that you have. And what I love about making my own stuff is that I can do whatever the hell I want. And people can love it, people can hate it. I don't actually really care at the end of the day. I just like the process of doing it. But I think what I really love about the creative process in general, the production process, the music production process, is just the act of doing it is so much fun. I mean, my main dude, Hefe, behind the camera over here, we talk about this all the time, how we don't really care what we're shooting. You know, the act of lighting, the act of filming, the act of capturing sound, the act of just capturing a moment on camera and producing it and then cutting it in the end, it's all fun. Like, we love it in general. Some things are a little more fun to shoot, like for sure, you know, when you're doing a music video across multiple scenes and locations, like it can be a little more exciting, you know? But it's oftentimes just comes down to the process too, which is, we love that so much.
We do. Yeah. And speaking of the process, I remember specifically an instance where like both of these two worlds blended together when we were both on the brand side together. I think you took PTO to go down to New Orleans and shoot a music video for an up and coming artist. And I remember you telling me how excited you were about, it was either the studio that you were going to be shooting in or the venue that was booked. Can you talk to me about, like, if you remember, how you were able to like shut down corporate brain as you maybe got on the plane to fly down and do full Nick creative brain ungated?
I mean, that was one of the most memorable experiences of my musical life. I think we flew down to New Orleans, recorded a very talented artist named Wim Grace at a famous recording studio called Esplanade Studios. That's an old church that's been turned into a studio. Recorded a 3-song EP there with her, and then also filmed 2 music videos in New Orleans. And yeah, it is tricky to go from like corporate brain to switching over to music producer brain. But in that instance, you know, I was also being hired to do something. So it was still like I was being hired to do a job. So there was a lot of crossover. Like the job was still to make the client slash boss happy. I had a very clear brief on what I was doing, what I wasn't doing. So the guardrails were there. It wasn't just creative freedom, but because it was just me and another guy engineering and then Wim, there was a lot of room to like experiment and play different parts. And I mean, I ended up playing drums and guitar and keys, some backup vocals on that, and then like filming and cutting a music video. So it was just like the whole thing. Can I say I was a pig in shit? I think I will say it because I don't know how else I would describe it. I mean, it was like everything I love doing. So it was pretty different from the corporate job in that sense. Because you know, I mean, corporate job does a lot of things well, pays bills, you meet tons of awesome people, like there's a lot of good experiences, but you do end up doing a lot of things that, you know, are a little dry compared to the creative process. And that weekend there wasn't a dry moment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I remember you telling me about it when you got back, and it sounded so cool. I remember being kind of jealous that you were able to like toe that line and come, you know, to a Fortune 500 company on Monday after spending this weekend getting recharged creatively, because it's really hard sometimes to strike that balance. So I want to use that as a transition to talk about this creative identity problem, and with your experience personally, like from the different roles you've held, from brand creative to musician to filmmaker, you know, shaping the way you approach creativity today. Do you think working normal jobs actually makes you more creative?
That was a good. You got some banger questions. Shout out to the
Thank you.
questions.
Thank you.
So I think the way I did it made me more creative, largely because I knew that I had a finite amount of time when I got off work to be independently creative. But then I think there's a type of creativity when you're in a workplace and you're surrounded by a bunch of other really sharp creative people that is wholly different than like solo work, where you have to both be creative, come up with good ideas, but also be super open-minded. You have to roll with the punches. You have to be able to accept rejection. And there's like a level of quality that you get in a corporation or a company that you don't necessarily get on your own, because there are so many smart-ass people making really good work. You know, like we always talked about at Adidas, being just sharp as hell was like the bar. Like everybody around us was smart and creative and knew what they were doing. So in order to get your ideas like on the board, you also had to be good. So there was just this constant pressure, I think, maybe not the right word, but kind of, to just do good work. And so that for sure makes you more creative.
I definitely remember feeling pressure, and it wasn't bad pressure, but it was like justifying pressure, like confirmation that like I'm in the right spot. I set this bar for myself. I'm here now, so you know, don't screw it up, because there's someone waiting for this job, right? Like, you know, the amount of applications and people that want to work, you know, in the places we have, and we're still lucky to be able to say that we did. And you know, someone like yourself who's been able to toe that line and do both, I think is really inspiring for anyone. Having worn both hats, I want to ask you, what do brand marketers misunderstand about artists?
Man, I saw that question on the paper and I was thinking about the answer. I mean, I think in reality, we're all just coming up with ideas and executing on them, right? And I think what artists, quote unquote artists, get to do is they're not necessarily like making shit for click-through rates. They're not making things so that they sell through. There's a pure creative expression that happens when artists are just making art, right? Like another reason why I love doing solo work is because you can take risks, you can make stupid, awful things that you know people don't like. It just scratches an itch, you know, and there aren't metrics. I think what maybe brand marketers are tied to, and I don't know that it's necessarily that they're getting it wrong, but there is a level of like, you have to have results at the end of creative work if you're a brand marketer, you know, and it's by design. So I don't know if it's something that they get wrong about it, but it's like art, but it's also tied to an end result that's selling a product, you know? And that's like that tension between marketing and sales that has always existed. It's built into the system. But it's hard to say that they get it wrong. I think one of the quick aside or tangent, or maybe it's a sort of just adding on to this idea, is so many people that work in this space are also artists, are also creative folks, are also like, so it's almost like it attracts creatives like moths to a flame a little bit. And because it's a line of work you can get into that allows you to scratch that creative itch.
I see that really everywhere I look across the industry, whether you're on the brand side or the agency side. And I think that's actually something that inspired me to pursue like a creative outlet outside of my day job, was because I realized how often that was, a thing for my peers at work. And not only did that make me feel inspired to go find my own, but also to like keep myself sharp. To our earlier point, it's like, well, shit, they're all doing it. Like, I need something outside of this to keep me fresh here. And I think that gives you some boundary in between those two roles to like show up right in either one, where you need to fill your cup in one, it's there. And you have this reliable, like you said earlier, steady source of like, job security, for lack of a better term, to keep you on track with your career goals. But then it's nice to have this like more free flowing, free shaping, independent journey on the outside that I think is I've found it very helpful.
Very helpful, and I think it's also super important to have
Mm-hmm.
in your life. Keeps the cup full. I mean, I was in the studio this weekend tracking drums with this punk band that I've been working with, and my cup hasn't felt as full as it did this morning. Waking up being like, damn, like the last 2 days were just like 2 9-hour days of just recording rock drum, and I was picking shit. I don't know, and it just makes you feel so. Kind of alive, not to sound cheesy, but like I was telling my girlfriend when I got home, like I just feel like I just drank like 10 cups of coffee. I'm just like riled up, and this was after the 2 very long days. So yeah, I don't know.
I love that.
Cup floweth over.
I love that. So kind of on that topic, and we were joking about it before we pressed record today, and you were joking about how no matter how much time we give ourselves in pre-production, there's always finessing happening up until, the light turns red. Talk to me a little bit about what happens in the moments before production begins. Let's start with a brand shoot and then talk about that same question for a music video.
Yeah. I mean, imagine, again, our guy behind the camera has lots of shit to say about this one as well. But first off, no matter how much time you get to set up and do pre-production, if you have an hour, you will use 59 minutes and 45 seconds. If you have 5 hours, you will use 4 hours and 58 seconds. Like today, we got here at 8:30 and we're setting up right up until our 1 o'clock shoot time.
Yeah.
And at about 12:45, the audio thing stopped working. And so it was just this panic of like, what in the, and I always make this joke that like, no matter what shoot it is, there's always a gremlin that gets into some part of the machine, right? There's like, we were in the studio this weekend and there was a gremlin that got into one of the compressors and it wouldn't work and it was making fuzzy noise. Had never made that noise before. We don't know why. The gremlin just follows you around and it will take something out. It could just be a microphone or a cable. Sometimes it's a camera. So that's kind of almost without fail, every time a shoot starts, I'm sweating. I'm pretty close to panicking, but I'm also like excited. Like we did a shoot last week where the host walking down the breezeway coming into the interview, and as she was walking into the interview, it feels like walking on stage a little bit because suddenly you're just like, okay, here we go. And the pressure is real because somebody hired you to do a job. It's not like you're just in your basement studio, like fucking around. Like this is a real job that somebody paid you decent money to do. So like, yeah, the stakes are high, but also like, I love that shit. Like I love high stakes. I love, in retrospect, the pressure. So I don't know. And then to your point, I think music videos tend to be lower stakes with more creativity. We just shot one with this band Compact 56, who's going to put out an album. It's a great album. And we shot across like 5 or 6 different locations, had talent. We weren't really paying the talent. So they were just like talent in quotation marks. They did a great job. I'll say that. But there was just a lot more license where you are able to like shoot a scene for as long as you want. You're allowed to really like make it look as good or weird or edgy as you need to. And again, there isn't like the end result of like click through or sell through or whatever. So there's just a little bit more creative license.
Yeah. And I remember like being on set for a brand photo shoot, because not only have you paid for all the people that are going to be there and you have model time booked and you have a stylist and you have a photographer and a videographer, and everything is like held to the most excruciating level of detail and timestamp, that if there are issues leading up to shoot, to go back to the question, you can feel that on set and you start to think about like way down the line, the business results suffering, even though they're not going to, because you figure it out and you roll with it. And, 9 times out of 10, you create exactly what you set out to do. But I would imagine that when you're doing it on your own time and it's something, when you're doing it for your own creative pursuit and it's not a job you're hired to do, there's not as much of that pre-stress feeling because like the stakes are a little bit lower, right?
It is a little bit lower. And I actually think that one of the things that doing it professionally teaches you is to let that pressure creep into your own work, so that when you are just making a music, because sometimes I'll make music videos on my own just in my basement, and like even when you're doing that, applying that same pressure to get it right so that your end result still looks good. That's one of the big learnings from doing it professionally, is that like you still need to hold yourself to a standard kind of at all times, because like, why wouldn't you? At the end of the day, especially as somebody who gets hired because of their catalog of work, you can't put out crap at all, really, because people are looking at everything, So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a good question though, man.
Thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, talking now about like the art itself. So when you think about the difference between commercial creativity and personal art, is creating for a brand fundamentally different from creating music below the surface? Because obviously the answer is yes, it's very different. I'm sure you'll say. But is there some similarities you found now that you've done both that maybe, normal people off the street would not make the connection between?
I love this. I spend so much time thinking about this. The creative process in general, my theory, I think it's closer to a law, but we'll call it a theory, is that the creative process, no matter what the function, is almost identical across all the mediums, right? The music process, making videos, painting something, making a commercial, coming up with a brand idea, the act of like ideating, and then it sort of coagulates into an idea. That's a weird word, but it's the only way to say it, really. Coagulates into an idea. Then you take that idea, either you're by yourself or you get your team together, and then you start executing against it, and then you get the thing that's done, and then you finish it. And there's a process for each step in all the creative mediums, right? You've got mastering in music, color grading in video, retouching in photo. I mean, any creative process you can think about, even cooking, right? You come up with a recipe. At the end, you put on a garnish. You make sure it looks beautiful before you present it. There's all these similarities between all the creative processes. And, I have my hands in a lot of them just because this line of work and the budgets. And, I do photography and music, and I'll hack a color grade if Hefe's not available, and you start to see the parallels in all of the different mediums. And to me, it's just like a fascinating thing, because, you meet different creatives and all, videographers are a certain type of people oftentimes, and like musicians, you kind of spot them a mile away, but they're all going through the same shit every time. And it's the same with like a brand marketing team, like you sit in a room and you ideate and come up with an idea, and then you got to execute against it. And there are certain people who are better at each phase and it's, I don't know, it's just the parallels are really fascinating to me. I spend way too much time thinking about this shit.
Do you find it harder to create when the work is on the personal side of that? Or do you find it harder when you're like more bound by, let's call it the corporate restrictions or the lanes that you're supposed to follow?
Yeah. The thing that's hard about personal work is dedicating time to it, especially when you're self-employed. So much around being self-employed, especially in the first few years, is survival. Getting enough money in the door to cover all the overhead, to pay the people you need to pay. So, I still make myself do creative work on my own because I know it will make me feel a certain way. But it can be very hard to do. And I think what I have taught myself to do, and this definitely rolls into the professional work, is even if I don't feel like it, if I have the time, I just do it. I know that my trick with music is, even if I don't feel like making music, if I dedicated time to it, I come in, I turn everything on, I get everything set up, get my synthesizer, drum machines all set up, hit record, and just start dicking around, And I know that if I do that, I will make something. And it's the same thing if I'm coming up with a pitch or coming up with an idea for a professional video, or if I'm coming up with something, maybe it's like, I don't really want to do this today. Like I just make myself sit down and start the work, and it will. So I think to answer the question, maybe neither is more difficult than the other. They just require a little bit different approach.
Yeah, that makes sense. Follow up to the point you made about making music. I want to kind of focus on that for a minute. When you sit down to start a song or an album, what does your creative process actually look like as it's unfolding? Do you have like a system or rituals that you have to go through, or is it different every time? Like, talk to me about what that creative process is for you as a musician.
Yeah, man. Well, that's a good question too. Shit. So it's changed, wildly changed over the years. Like before, I was doing this all professionally, right? I would stay up until like 1 or 2 in the morning because that was my only window of time. Like when you and I knew each other at Adidas, most nights I was staying up till like 1 a.m. making music and then going to work the next day because I was like that was my only time I could do it, and I wasn't willing to like sacrifice it. But nowadays, I'll dedicate a couple days a week. Sometimes it's 1 day a week, sometimes it's more, to just making music. So that part, I don't have to stay up as late. I actually feel fresher. And it feels like because it's so intertwined with all the stuff we're doing that I just, I'm getting better and faster and I can crank stuff out super quick, which is exciting.
Yep.
But as far as like the process goes, I mean, if you're talking about how I actually like form a piece of music, I mean, generally I'll start with like a drum beat, open up, and either I'll record a drum beat or I'll just program something. And then a lot of times I'll like take a song that I really love and like just straight rip off that drum beat. And it never sounds like them. It always ends up sounding like me. And then I'll just party on top of that and start putting layers. And, but I mean, it can happen. It can be a guitar riff. It can be a drum. It can be anything really. I mean, but I know that I have to like, whatever immediately catches me, I have to put down and I have to start just kind of riffing on something, just to get moving. Like you just have to get moving. That's like the lesson that I learned a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you have these, these blocks of time you dedicate to music, I would imagine there's a lot of ideas or starts of songs or starts of albums maybe that take off and then maybe they don't go where you intended them to. How do you like either revisit them or sit with it and understand when an idea is worth finishing?
When an idea is worth finishing, boy, you just kind of know, I think. I mean, and I don't have any hit songs or anything, so I mean, was I right? I don't know, but yeah, I've got a couple songs that have popped, and then they're not really the ones you expect them to be. There's just like a gut feeling you get when you're putting something together, and for me, it's like I get really giddy when I'm working on something, and I mean, hundreds of drafts of old songs that I always think I'm going to go back to, and I almost never do, because the stuff that I tend to really like, I tend to finish really quick and then polish. Whereas like just little demos of things, 90% of those just stay in the drafts. So I don't know. That's a really tough question though. Like right now I'm putting out an EP very soon, and then there's going to be like a follow-up EP to that. So it's like 3 songs and then 3 songs. And so those are like work in progress where I've got, a very solid demo that now I'm like finishing, like we're talking about. There's a process where you get a good demo and then you like polish and finish. So that is different than just going back to ideas.
Yeah.
Those type of things I am diligent about finishing, because I think that's another thing that creatives oftentimes don't do enough of, is like get in the habit of finishing work. Like, okay, this song is done, I'm putting it out. This video is done, I don't give a shit. Like, sure, it's not quite perfect, but I'm putting it out. Engineer I used to work with, I still work with him, used to always say that things are never done. They're just good enough to get out. Because there's always something you can notice about it. There's always some tweak you have to make. There's always some EQ thing, whatever. So I try to get in the practice of just finishing stuff like fast and often, so I can just, okay, that's good. Sending R1 to a client is the same way. Like going through R1, you're like, oh man, I know there's things they're going to call out, but like just get it to them, let them call it out, and then, it's like a practice.
Yeah. Otherwise R1 would never be done.
R1 would never be done.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that does separate the folks who are able to do it professionally versus like hobbyists, because I have a lot of musician friends who sit and just tweak things endlessly. And, maybe that's their thing, but like for me, I want to get things out into the world, for better or for worse. I mean, I don't let anybody hear the shit I was putting out 10 years ago because I was in the same habit of like, I'm just going to put this out, man. I don't care. And it's garbage. Yeah. But that's how you learn.
Okay. To wrap us up, I have a few quick fire closing questions. You ready?
Let's do it.
The first one, which one is harder to direct, a brand shoot or a music video?
A brand shoot. There's way more cooks and the stakes are higher. So yes, a brand shoot.
What is one creative rule you always break?
Oh my, that is one creative rule I always break. man, I don't know. I mean, okay, there is the idea that like good ideas can come from anywhere. I believe that. But sometimes everybody just needs to shut up and get to work, you know? Like, so I will say that, like, in theory, I always say that I follow like the Rick Rubin philosophy of like, good ideas can come from anywhere. And there is a point in the creative process where that's true. But there's also a point in the process where you just have to do your shit and everybody just needs to shut up and work, you know? And I think that's one of the reasons, again, you can't see Hefe, but I talk to him a lot about this a lot, where we both know when it's time to just like, okay, we're set, go.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need to hem and haw about what this and that. You know, we know when to get things done and when to like ideate. And that's really important to know that.
Yep. And the last one, when do you know a piece of work is finished?
Oh man. It's never finished, right? Things are always going to be, there's never been a thing I put out that I haven't gone back and looked at and said, man, I wish I would have X, Y, or Z. You have to, it's like, I go through this process with music where I call it all decision to final, where if I'm in a final mix phase and every tweak I do, I can't go back, right? So I think when you get to that stage and you just have to at one point say like, this is 95%, 98% good, and you just shut it, and oftentimes it's when I send it to get mastered or when I send it off to get graded, then it's finished, even though you know it's probably not finished.
Yeah.
That's a tough one though.
Well, speaking of finished, that was my last question. So thanks for being willing to be put on the spot. This was another episode of the Crossfade podcast, and we'll be back very soon with another episode.